Our reading from Matthew contains some very, very powerful words. Whoever receives you receives me, and whoever receives me receives him who sent me. I was going to take those verses out of context, and then I was urged to reread the entire chapter, because I wanted to know what preceded those words. And what I found is that Jesus was preparing his disciples to go out into the world, to heal the sick, to raise the dead, and to spread the good news that God is a loving God and doesn't play favorites. In essence, they were turning the entire world as they knew it, all of the laws, all of the rituals, all of the everyday life things that they believed, upside down. It was no longer true that a rich person had blessings from God because it was evident in all of their possessions. It meant that God's love was for the leper who was ostracized. It was for the man who was begging for alms for his everyday livelihood. And it was for everyone who heard the words of the disciple that God was a loving God for everyone. They were told that this news would not be well received by everyone, that they would be persecuted because of their words, but they had to speak boldly anyway, that their bodies could be hurt, but not their true selves. So many people think, this is who I am. This is my name. This is who I'm married to. This is who my children are. This is where I work. And nothing could be further from the truth. We were reality before the day we were born. And when we give up this temporary shell of flesh and blood, we will once again become our true selves, which is spirit. That's who we truly are. And Jesus was telling his disciples, the way is not going to be easy, but you've got to do it anyway. You've got to speak, and speak boldly. Shout it from the tops of houses so that people know they are loved. And don't worry when you get in a tough space, a tough state, because the Spirit will give you the words that you need to say. The Spirit will enable you. And he also admonished them, you're going to be disruptors. Mother against daughter, father against son, kids against parents. It's not going to be an easy and sometimes not a pleasant trip, but the trip must be made. And I got to thinking about that. And I got to thinking about our true nature of being spirit. And I was brought back to the time when I first realized that. I mean, realized it so that it became the only reality that I could hang on to, that it was real for the first time in my life. Many, many decades ago, I'm not going to tell you how many, but decades ago, I belonged to a little church that made our slogan that we're so proud of, you are welcome here. Well, that church said essentially the same thing, but that church meant Christians and Jews and Muslims and Buddhists and Zen masters. Everybody was welcome because the dogma or the doctrine was, wherever you are on your religious path, wherever you are on your journey of faith, is exactly where God wants you to be. So we only had one rule. You love everybody. It was so beautiful. And one night we had a meditation session. not a Bible study, but a meditation session. And in a room, probably as big as from the doorway through the sanctuary, including the chancel up here. We had that much space. And there were about 25 or 30 of us, and we sat in a circle. And our pastor said, okay, hold hands. Make sure that your palms are touching. And we were quiet, and our eyes were closed, and it was just silence. And she said, now feel what's going through you. She said, our spirits are traveling from each one of us to the next. And I want you to think, God bless that person on my left who is sharing their spirit with me. And God bless the person on my right with whom I am sharing the spirit. It was a powerful exercise. If you stop and think about it, every single solitary person around that circle was blessing 2 other people. And you were being blessed as well by 2 other people. And it was beautiful. It was really beautiful. And when that portion of the exercise ended, we put all of our chairs against the wall. And it was just a large empty area. And she said, just walk. She said aimlessly, mindlessly. She said, don't plan a path. Don't go in a circle or a square. Just walk. And not one word had been spoken to this time, and not one word was to be spoken during this next part. And when our paths crossed with another person, we would stop, and we would look that person in the eye for just a moment, and then the only thought we were encouraged to think was, I see the Christ in you. We did that for no more than maybe 10, 15 minutes. And the energy, the love, the spirit in that room went through the roof. It was so palpable you could almost reach out and touch it. Nobody wanted to leave. And we were really sorry when we did have to leave. But that was the night that I realized the Christ Spirit resides, not out there somewhere, but within each and every one of us. And our privilege and our pleasure and our responsibility is to share that. Because when we put that out there, whether it's with people we know, people we don't know, people that we pass on the street and just smile and nod our heads, we're sending that spirit out. And whoever receives it from us receives Jesus the Christ, receives God. Isn't that a beautiful gift we can give those we encounter? And this idea of welcome, it is hospitality on Jesus' part, because Jesus is all about love. Jesus is all about acceptance. Jesus is all about inclusion. Nobody is excluded. Nobody. I have 3 stories. One is Mom, one is my daughter, one is me, about spirit and sharing. My mother lived with us for the last 6 years of her life. She came from New York. And shortly after she got here, we went to a grocery store. And you know how it is, you're standing in line, and you just start talking to people, usually about the weather. Thank God, North Dakota has some interesting weather. And we were chatting, and Mom waited until we got in the car, and she looked at me and she said, Camille, did you know that woman? And I said, no, Mom, I don't know her. She said, but you were talking to her. And I said, Mom, welcome to North Dakota. We talk to each other here. And this was kind of new to her, because in New York, you don't make eye contact with anyone that you do not personally know. And once Mom got the idea, couldn't shut her up. And it was beautiful, because she was a lovely lady to just talk with. In fact, we had two Jehovah's Witnesses come to the door, and I was not home. And she invited them in, and they sat down, and they started chatting, and she had a wonderful time just chatting with them. And then they got around to telling her God's only name was Jehovah. And she said, now look, girls. She said, I was born a Roman Catholic. I am a Roman Catholic. I'm going to die a Roman Catholic. But I like visiting with you, so come by anytime. And those girls came back again and again and again just to chat. And they all, I think, benefited from that experience. But it wasn't so when we went looking for a church home for Mom. People were friendly enough as we were sitting down in the pews, and I don't mean to rag on Roman Catholics, I really don't. I know many who are just beautiful, like Mother Teresa is beautiful. But when we were looking for a church home, they welcomed us in the pews, and I figured, well, right after the last hymn, I'll introduce them to Mom and we'll see where she's comfortable. But during Mass, people obviously understood, I'm no longer a Roman Catholic. I didn't know when to stand and sit and kneel and stand and sit and kneel. I didn't know the responses. I didn't know the songs. I didn't know, and it was very obvious. And you could see people just kind of moving away from this stranger in their midst. And one church, I thought, well, this lady's really friendly. As soon as the last hymn was over, I'm going to introduce her to Mom and see what happens. And we were sitting right next to the aisle, so you needed to exit this way. I thought it was an opportune time. The organ hadn't even stopped playing when I looked up, and this woman is booking it as quickly as she can out the other side. So we just went to the church closest to home. And Mom was happy there. They were very good to her. The priest would visit her, and they brought her communion every Sunday when she was no longer able to go to church physically. And they treated her beautifully, just beautifully. That was my mom's story. My Libby's story is she went to on a trip, and she took the bus. I forget what the occasion was. It was an unusual way for her to travel. But she ended up in a bus station, and she said, Mom, I didn't know which end was up. I didn't know where I was supposed to go, what time I was supposed to be there, when the bus would show up, which one I was supposed to take. And she said the only other people there were 3 young black men, strangely dressed. And she said, I was afraid, Mom. I was really afraid. And she said, after a few minutes, I thought, how stupid is this? So she got up, she went over to the 3 guys, and she said, fellas, I need help. And she said, could you help me? And she explained her plight, and she said, Mom, they were like 3 mother hens. They made sure I knew exactly what was going on. They made sure I was in the right place at the right time. She said they couldn't have been nicer because they shared spirit. They communicated on a level that our vocal cords could never reach, that our minds sometimes have trouble accepting. But they parted friends, and Jesus was shared during that encounter. I learned a lot from my daughter. And my story, I was unchurched for 20 years, 50 years ago. I was unchurched for 20 years. This is my 30th anniversary as a UCC member. And I was experiencing a challenge in my life, one of those things that you just have trouble handling alone. And I tried everything I could think of, but I realized I needed other people. And I thought, well, maybe a church family might help, maybe. And I I started at the UCC Church in Bismarck once I found it. I'm directionally challenged, and the UCC Church in Bismarck is hard to find if you don't know exactly where it's at. I think it was 3 times before I actually located the building, and then I could figure out how to get home. But I went for a Sunday, and of course, Doug Roberts was pastor then, and he gave one of the most wonderful sermons. It just touched me, it embraced me. And it was one of those times when, you're really hurting so badly you can't even get through the hymns. I couldn't sing the hymns. And when we got to the last hymn, I was crying. And I thought, I gotta get out of here. The minute this thing is over, I'm out of here. I gotta get home. And wouldn't you know it, the organ had not even played the last note. And this busybody puts her hand on my arm and says, my dear, we have coffee fellowship after worship. I do so hope you'll join us. Please say you'll come. What are you going to do? Say no? Take off? No, I took her up on that, and I thought to myself, 1 cup of coffee, and then I'm out of here. Well, I think about 2.5 sips into my first cup of coffee, I was talking to these 2 women who were so accepting, so encouraging, so uplifting. I wanted more of that. I knew I was in the right place because what they were sharing with me is the Christ Spirit, the one that reaches out and lets you know you are loved, you are cherished, you are more than just welcomed here. Come into the peace and the love of Christ. And the rest, as they say, is history. I checked out the UCC website, and I got onto one area that I could not reproduce, no matter how many times I tried. But fortunately, I wrote down what I found there. Some gentleman had written on that, in that area, the way you treat other people is the way you treat God. And so often we forget that. We enjoy and we acknowledge this Christ Spirit within, but we forget that whenever we encounter others and we can share ourselves with them, that you also are meeting someone who very, very well may have the Christ Spirit within them as well. And it's just that connection. I can almost tell you what church I'm in if I come through the door of a church blindfolded and not having any direction. I am very happy to say that the vast majority of UCC churches, because I feel enveloped in the Spirit that invades the place. You see, you can't ever give away Spirit. You can't ever give away joy. You can't ever give away love without its reflecting back on you, without its being imbued in the walls and the ceiling and the floors and the air in between. This is a beautiful church to come into for that reason. And I think what we need to do is to remember Mother Teresa's saying here, shine through me and be so in me that every soul I come in contact with may feel thy presence in my soul. Let them look up and see no longer me, but only Jesus. Stay with me, and then I shall begin to shine as you shine, so to shine as to be a light to others. With the grace of God, may we really grab a hold of this idea, this way of life, so that Jesus' reign may be strengthened and expanded in our world. Amen.